London area and need an ex-Coventry City player to help you move house, there's only one name you should call. Pasky, Pasky, Pasky! Pasky, Pasky, Pasky! Because when you move home, then it's the van, the van, the van, the van, the van, the van, the van that will bring us together. Pasks Removals. Because when you move home, you just need to ask. Listening to the lean up. God, I'm not going to go back and re-record it. We've just had a debacle over this. Hello, you're listening to the Lamptey Show. My name is Joey, and this week I am joined by Neil.
Hello.
And by Imogen.
Hi, Neil. Oh, hi, Joey.
It's not as easy as it looks, is it?
Sorry.
And by Dom.
Hi there.
And of course, this week, again, we are brought to you in association, nay, powered by Pasks Removals and Karen Bal, energy-style drink that will keep you up all night. We've had 3 games since the last time we spoke. Have any of you got anything that would resemble a moment of the week or period or 2 weeks or however you'd want to call it? Don't all rush at once.
Many things to say, but I want to talk about Sakamoto.
You look like you've got notes, Neil. Have you got notes?
No. I remember when we first did this, the first few weeks, I was incredibly nervous and I used to write notes and notes, like literally verbatim what I was going to say. And I listened back, you could definitely tell. It was terrible those first few weeks when we did this. But everything that comes out of my mouth now is purely unplanned. But
Sakamoto.
Yeah. Sakamoto. Well, I want to talk about Haji Wright, but I think everybody else is going to talk about Haji Wright. So Sakamoto, it's really weird, but I just love the fact that that generally, as a notion, he's pretty darn good. But that turn, the feint, the dummy, the fact that everybody in the stadium now knows he's going to do this thing, and it doesn't stop him from trying it, and it doesn't allow anybody to prevent him from actually executing it. And when we did it the other day, we were all waiting for it. He did it. Completely fooled the defender. Whole stadium cheers. And you're like, yeah, that's all I want in my life. I want to see that every single game.
But in the first half on Friday, he also then did it and then afterwards went to do it and was like, nah, I'm going outside anyway. I've got to go back inside even. Like because of where I sit, I was basically on Sakamoto cam. Yeah. I just thought in the first half particularly, I was just like, oh my God, it's so good to have you back. You're such a cut above whoever would come in for you. Yeah, really tremendous. Faded in the second half, but again, I feel like that's probably going to be a big theme of what we'll go on to.
We're allowing that, yeah, absolutely.
I think it's amazing that he's come back so strong after such a long period out. Anyone else want to kind of fire anything else in at this point?
I think the main thing was just like the whole like build up to Friday, where the season was back, and just get into that whole ritual again of going to the stadium and seeing the familiar faces and getting into the football again. It's great to be back.
Yeah, anything. So I did a couple of very saccharine tweets about that very thing, about kind of pre-game, just the difference in experience and atmosphere compared to like even as recently as 2 or 3 seasons ago, where we probably weren't even back at home. We were probably playing in Birmingham, which might have contributed towards it. It just really feels nice at the minute, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's class. It's class.
It would be nice. I think it would be nice, generally speaking, if there weren't so many people there.
Yeah, that really annoys me.
Just my rule in general. Yeah.
The queue. I've never had to queue for the women's lose before, and now you genuinely have to wait. And I'm like, I'm sorry. Where have you people come from? Go home.
What is this?
What is
like?
This?
I don't. I'm not going to go down on 44 minutes, but I do also need to get a pint at halftime. Like, let's all be mindful of my needs, please. But yeah, you're right. It was absolutely delish. And to underline it, I think I'll sort of usurp Imogen here and give you my moment of the week. So I actually saw Imogen in the wild for a home game. It's probably the first time ever at a home game we've ever seen each other.
Yeah,
surely.
You've stolen my moment of the week. Yeah, it was you dressed as an extra from This Town. It looked fabulous.
Sweet.
Well, I don't know what This Town is, but I assume it's a huge compliment because I know how I was dressed that day, and it was absolutely fabulous.
Very, very. Did your mates described it as two-tone? I think.
Yeah, but what a terrible description, because it wasn't two-tone in the slightest. Even if I'd have been wearing black and white, which I think would have been the closest that would have been, that wouldn't be just simply two-tone. I had a polo shirt on and a pair of jeans.
I don't know what standard.
I don't know what was two-tone about it, but anyway, but it was, genuinely lovely to see. And again, it was already nice to see you, but also it was nice in the context of just a busy, bustling outside the game. Look at a game that everyone was looking forward to. We just beat Bristol City, which I don't think everyone I don't think we care massively about, but it makes such a big difference compared to the trepidation that you'd have had coming into it after the Stoke game necessarily. It just felt gorgeous. Like the weather was nice. Yeah. Just everyone just seemed so happy and healthy in a way that just doesn't feel right at a COV game. No one was. What is it that when the Simpsons moved to the place in the "You Only Move Twice" episode, where they're like, nobody's shoving each other all the time.
Oh yeah.
A bit like that. I was like, there's not people. Just look how many people there are. Nobody's actively fighting each other.
What's going on?
It's lovely.
But
it was lovely to see you, Joey.
It's always lovely to see me. Right, let's get on to some actual.
I've got another moment of the week, so I just remembered it. It's completely nothing to do with anything that happened on the pitch. It was seeing you appearing in some video, Joey, some lovely video about COV, which is actually very nice. And you did what did you? We're gonna have to link to this, but you did some sort of COV film, and you were a quizmaster, and I thought you did jolly well, and it was really good. I'm going to link to it. In the tweets when people hear it, because if you've not watched it, you should watch it, because there's lots of familiar faces in it, all chatting about what COV and what it's like to support COV, which I thought was very well made.
Mark Higgett, who is a tremendous gentleman that I only met 2 weeks ago or so, is a friend of a friend, and I think it was Katie Stafford, lovely Katie Stafford, who was going to do that role originally of Quizmaster. And for circumstances beyond her control, she was no longer able to do it. And at the last minute, he apparently asked this friend of a friend, is there anybody that would be free enough, not even sort of capable of fulfilling this role?
Oh, God.
Is there anyone that we can guarantee hasn't got anything to do in the evening that could and would have enough COV crap that he could put in his office to sort of fulfill this obligation? And so that's why I was involved in it. This was not a first choice situation. It was, this person is the only person sad enough in the entire world that would just go, I haven't got anything better to do, as long as you come to my house. So, but the main thing is that the documentary is a lovely old bit of business. And when I looked at it and talked to him about it, I loved the fact that, and I know that we're in serious glasshouse territory in this particular comment, but that it's not just white blokes between the ages of 20 and 35 that are in it. It is a reasonable representation. Yeah, but that somehow you're sort of like sort of co-optably either male
one of us,
or so middle class that actually that you cease to exist as a gender.
Well, that was me thinking I was a token, but now I just sort of I don't even mean that to you.
No, I didn't even realize you were. If I'd have known that you were a woman, I'd have never asked you on. We have strict guidelines around the type of person that could have been brought into this enterprise. But all jokes aside, is that I just liked the fact that looking through some of the sort of pre-stuff that he'd done, and this was literally the last thing that he had to put on tape because he was desperate to get out for the first game of the season. Was it just felt like much more of a. He would acknowledge he would have liked it to have been further than that, but it was a more Coventry-ish Coventry than I think a football documentary could have done if you'd have not endeavoured to have considered that element of it. And so I think he should be proud of what he's knocked out there. But yeah, it was just it's a nice thing. I think I've done my usual job of just sort of very, very, very quietly sharing it, but I'll share it again.
Yeah, I think so. It's good.
Right. Okay. So 3 games. It's difficult because let's start with, I guess, what we do is we start with Oxford, because I think that's probably the one that is the game that we've got most to say about. And I have a feeling that probably what will happen is that we will then talk about what happened in the previous 2 games in the context of that game, which is probably enough to fill us up for what we need to do, right? So, Dom, do you want to start us off with kind of your overall conclusions from the Oxford game?
Well, I think the overall conclusion is I think we're going to be a pretty strong team at home this season. But oh my God, our defence! How are we going to square that circle? Because that threatens to be quite the issue this season. But overall, we were so good. It was kind of a weird game because I thought Oxford were really good value for the points. But it would have been an absolute travesty if we hadn't won that. We had 20 odd shots. It was complete domination, really.
Early question. There was, to me, when I was thinking about playing Oxford at that early point of the season, is there's a level to which you go, well, they are statistically speaking the worst team in the division because of their previous league position. But also you wonder whether there's ever going to be a point in the season where they're going to be more confident. Like, actually, can you get a team like that too early? Because they were disjointed and they gave us a lot of opportunities, but they did have a go at things when they had the opportunity to get on the ball, didn't they?
Yeah, I mean, they're off the back of a really impressive playoff campaign. I thought watching the playoff final against Bolton was quite ominous for us because they just completely stopped a team with possession from playing. And they were really disciplined, and then they were like really smart on their counter, and they were kind of trying to do the same thing to us. I thought on Friday night they had the wingers quite high, just ready to get in behind on the counter in the first half in particular, and that was the big threat because I thought Goodrum and Paheta on the wings for them were really impressive, just making those runs behind to stretch us. Goodrum on the right in particular. But then in the second half, they changed to a much more defensive mentality because I think they saw how much of a threat Sakamoto and Van Evik were on the right, and they were absolutely murdering them in the first half. And I thought the first goal in particular, I think that's a goal we should try and rinse and repeat throughout the season because that is definitely something we're going to be very strong at. That combination between Van Evik and Sakamoto on the right wing, either one playing them into a space for a cross, and then you've got Haji Wright on the left wing attacking the back post. He's going to be a huge problem for any fullback to deal with.
Just very quickly, did anyone see that goal and then think about the big lad chat that we had on the previous podcast and go, oh, fuck, are we... Oh, no.
You're wrong again.
Because that is, I mean, there's no way you could describe that as anything other than a towering header. Huge apologies to Andy Turner. Right? That's the first apology of the season, apparently. But it was, I agree with what you're saying. Their link up. I know that you talked about Sakamoto before, Neil, but you're right, Dom, is that you all of a sudden it rekindled those memories of how they read each other. And ironically, it plays into what we were talking about, right? That's the sort of aggression from Wright that you don't see enough of for me.
Yeah, exactly.
And he just completely the guy he had no chance, did he? He just completely rolled over him. No foul either, just dominance in the air. So yeah, you're right. You think that's a goal that hopefully we can replicate?
Yeah, and then, just throughout the second half, we were dominating. We were looking really competent on the ball. When we were seeing some really good stuff from Torp in particular, I thought, in the first half there, where his passing was really good. Binks as well. And just having that ability to make the pitch really big. And if they wanted to stop us, if they wanted to force us down the wings to try and stop that threat in the centre, then they had our big threat on the wings to deal with. And then if they tried to if they tried to deal with the wide threat, then we can move it in the centre. And there's some really encouraging stuff. Wright for the second goal, taking about 4 defenders out with a bit of skill, showing he's just such a big threat in that wide left position. It's not just about sort of playing as that wide striker. He's someone who can actually do some of those bits and pieces you'd want a winger to do in terms of carving out opportunity. Nice little move forward like Sims, I think, got a decent enough touch, however intentional it was, sort of lay that into the path of Sakamoto, and then Van Evik fired pretty well past the goalkeeper, and that was sandwiched between a really disappointing goal to concede from a set piece where you could say it was a little unfortunate, but then also just someone take charge of that.
Yeah.
And sort of a constant theme of our defending, sort of going back for much of last season, really, where you can say unlucky things have happened, but also there's just a bit of lack of leadership and haplessness to it.
They were both really avoidable goals to concede, but equally they didn't, to me, necessarily point to some sort of like horrendous weakness. Like they were just, apart from a sense that I think you talked about up top, is a kind of just very generally speaking, the defence not quite being the standard that you'd hope it be.
Yeah, and I think the second goal was that Oxford scored was a little bit more frustrating to me, where it just felt like the organisation wasn't there, the sort of determination to defend wasn't there, and we kind of let that happen to us. And if it wasn't for a sloppy back pass in the final minute of the game, what really should have been, I think, a 3 or 4-0 win would have been a 2-2 draw. And we can't keep on having to score 3 goals to win games. I know we've got a lot of firepower, and I think one of my favourite moments of the game was like the very last attack, which was seeing Jay De Silva win the ball and just play a pass inside, and we've got 4 players who are absolutely furiously fast running out of defence, who looked absolutely frightened of them. And another interesting as well is when the ball went to Mason Clark, the player we've told he's got to play on the left wing. He's got to play on the left wing because he loves cutting inside onto his right foot. What does he do when he gets a chance on his right side? He cuts inside onto his left foot and kind of squanders it a little bit. But that's really encouraging to see. It also made me thinking, well, if we can sort out defence, we've got so much pace on the counter attack, and if we can harness that, that's going to make us even more frightening. It's going to give us another way of beating teams.
Can I jump in and use the opportunity to have my first moan of either the season or the night? And this is probably an unfair one. It might be a speculative moan, but I'm going to chuck it in anyway. So on the way back, I was tortured by thinking about the substitutes, because he brought Mason Clark on, who is very explicitly a left winger, to play on the right wing. He took Sims off, who'd scored in midweek, who hadn't played terribly well, but that was, I don't think there was anything in there that I was like, this guy has to come off. And he brought on Thomas Asante, who is very much a wide player that has been asked to play as a striker for 2 years on and off. And then Wright was left on the left, which in some ways makes sense, but in the context of what was going on, I couldn't understand how those 3 players were up top but that Wright hadn't moved centrally, Thomas Asante hadn't moved to the right, and that Ephraim Mason-Clark hadn't moved to the left, where that so obviously is then satisfying natural positions for them. But that, to your point, Neil, earlier, which I think was very astute, is that Wright is nominally a striker, but he's not a striker, is he? I don't think, for me. I think all of his damaging work, as again was exemplified on Friday, was you sort of have to leave him on the left because he's too good to not do that. But the wider context of this is that against Stoke, I thought we'd been hit and miss throughout the game, and that the one period of time where it looked like we were starting to come into it was the period between the second half kicking off and when we made a load of subs, and then we made them subs and it seemed to die a death a little bit again. And I don't know whether there's a bit of a we're going to make subs on 60 minutes situation at the minute that I'm not sure is then taking into consideration what's happened on the pitch. 2 games or 3 games, however you want to look at it, obviously not a big enough sample size to sort of assess it on. But that's 2 league games in a row where you've gone, I don't understand what's happening with this. Am I going mad, or did anyone else feel that? Imogen, did you have any sense of that when you were watching it?
Not to that extent, although the 60 minutes feels like that's hallmark Robbins. He loves an hour mark change up. And I didn't mind actually the subs that he made in terms, I thought the positions worked pretty well. And I thought the most important thing about those last 20, 30 minutes were keeping Wright where he was, because I think he was causing so much damage as he had created the subs around him rather than putting the subs on where their correct position on paper should be and disrupting the flow from Wright.
I get that, but why take Sims off?
It's something different. I mean, is it that complicated? I don't know. Like he wasn't involved. Basically,
I think he had a terribly effective game.
So it's kind of a bring on your other striker to try something different. I mean, that's a pretty normal thing to do, isn't it?
But it's not a normal Robbins thing to do. Robbins' thing is, I know what it's like to be a striker because I've been a striker, and I just leave my striker on because I know that they need the confidence to score goals. And he took him off against Stoke. He took him off against Oxford. He brought him on against Bristol City and he scored. It's just unusual Robbins treatment compared to what McNulty got and what Godden got and what everyone else that's gone on to score a load of goals. Sims, I think, is good enough now that whilst I agree he hadn't played terribly well in either of those games, he's also Sims. And that goal against Bristol City, you're like, that's what I know that if you're on the pitch, you can do. And I just think it's a bit naff that he's getting hooked in that way for someone that he's not. Thomas Asante isn't a striker. He looks like a really
used to it though.
But I don't know whether it's good.
It might not be. But I just say
that's a good sentence, isn't it? That's good analysis. I don't know whether good it is.
But like,
you know what I mean?
I just think, I think it's just, in a way, it's going to be different this year, and it's going to be different because we basically have 6 options in our attacking areas where in previous years, our options have been at many points, we've got to bring on Godden or I've got to bring on Tavares, and it's just different, whereas now he's literally got the squad of his dreams and he will do. And I think it is different to him. I don't think he does bring on people in the 60th minute. I think a classic Mark move is if we're doing well, he will keep them playing until he will just keep them going because he doesn't want to mess around with it. I think there's a lot of change there this year. There's no Vivash. There's multiple coaches sitting behind him. He's got a completely different looking attack. I think he will recognise that it's a squad game and he's just going to be using his players far more than he ever has done before. And I don't even think it's necessarily like a slight on Sims, the fact that he kind of came off in those games, because I'm pretty absolutely certain he'll be starting the next game and he'll probably start the next few. I mean, the cups and stuff of things get jumbled around, but when we need a number 9, I think Sims is absolutely our number 9. And it's just early season where he's getting as many players, as many sort of minutes on the pitch as possible. I don't think it's quite as almost just certain as that.
Just think the psychology of a striker is different to almost any other position on the pitch. I think if we're going to be successful this season, we need them to the big lads to get us 20 goals a season, realistically. And Wright has hit the ground running, clearly, like is straight away, even off the back of an injury, just was a menace on Friday. I just thought he was like, I thought there was too much that we were satisfied went out for corners, but that they were just really struggled to deal with him. Sims hasn't done the same, but they're very different players. And I think that Sims is goals, isn't he? I just think that this is a guy everything is. And I just wonder, at what point do you keep bringing him off? And does he keep going? This is another game where I've empirically upset the manager or like disappointed the manager because I've not done well enough, and what that does. And as well as that, like if you've played 90 and not scored, or you played 60 or not scored, I think the way that everyone looks at it is you started and didn't score. Whereas that's a lot less time. That's another half an hour that
it has to change.
Sims rounds the keeper if he latches onto that right chance or whatever. I just think Thomas Asante, if we're going to go up this season, probably needs to score us 10 goals, but Wright probably needs to score us 25. And I think managing how that happens is going to be crucial. Robbins is clearly cleverer than I am about doing it. I'm just saying, as usual, making sure that he is in peak mental condition to score 25 plus goals this season, I think is going to be massive, because if he doesn't, we're not going anywhere.
And I think that's so likely to happen. I still think, between that and also getting the other players on the pitch, because that is going to be the other big thing. How is he going to create this squad game where, if you look back to last season, our most successful period of play was during December, where we were able to concertedly manage and create our teams each game. The Leeds away game, we literally had two teams on the pitch and he managed that exactly how he wanted to. Where we struggled was where we didn't have the options to use that squad and we were forcing players to play longer than they needed to. I just think it's a completely different mindset. And I don't disagree. Like, certainly for someone like Sims and the striker, there is a very specific sort of nuance towards how they're going to think about things. But he's got to grow up. Well, I'm being harsh because he's never said anything of this. You've said this for him. But I just think he's like, it's not going to be the same sort of problem. Like, honestly, they're all going to have to play minutes and it's going to be switching loads around, and we've got to try to make that work.
I'm glad you're not a therapist.
Yeah, why not? Oh, well, yeah.
Pull yourself together, mate.
Is that not how it works? We've signed somebody, by the way. Just a breaking news. Who's Norman Bassett?
It's another striker.
It's another striker.
Actually, it's Norman Bassett, probably not Bassett. He's Belgian, so
he's Harry Bassett's son.
Yeah, sure. Okay, I'd never heard of this guy, but that's just breaking news.
It's. I mean, the problem is that it's not massively breaking news because it's happening while we record this at 21:40 p.m. Well, no, that is p.m., isn't it? But 9:40 p.m. UK time now.
3 weeks later, when somebody listens to it, yeah.
Yeah, well, it's and we tried to do the funny one that we tried to do was the cup draw live.
Yeah.
What a premise! But the is that, yeah, I guess you are right. It is happening now. It's just that time is inconsistent for certain people, isn't it? Yeah.
Actually, did we do the cup? Was it us two? You did something on your previous YouTube channel, didn't you? Some sort of live.
This was no. Me, you, and Laurie on one of the very first season opens.
Yeah.
We did It happened to coincide with when the first round of the League Cup was being drawn, and we sort of covered it live as if we were very earnestly doing it. And then, of course, we put it out 3 or 4 days afterwards, so people had to just sit through it.
This is what we do.
Yeah, and this is why no one listens. Okay, so Sims. Anyone else think that I'm just being a dick here? Do you think that this is just fine?
I think it's a more holistic approach that he's taking, isn't it? And he's got blood in those newer people. I just don't think it's that deep. I get what you're saying, but I'm too concerned about how Sims is going to be feeling after one game where he's taken off.
Fair dues. Dom, you've talked roughly speaking about the defence. I'm going to throw to Neil and ask you, what did you make of the defence, having watched 2 or 1 or 3 games so far?
It was, I think, interesting again to see what Mark's doing with the players. I think he's taking the games to really have a look at them. I was surprised to see Latabaudiere and Binks the other night when I heard it, and then the more you start to think about it, and then the more you sort of saw us trying to play, it made more sense in the sense where Binks certainly is probably the most effective one with the ball, and Latabaudiere seems to be, again, somebody who's able to work with the ball better than sort of Kitching and Thomas. I mean, they are fairly, I mean, they can do their job with the ball, but they're also fairly chaotic at times. So I think, I think that's what he was trying, just to work with a defence which made most sense with the ball. I completely agree with Dom, though, in the sense where there is a lack of almost assertiveness just in terms of the decisions that happen when we do defend. And it's strange because that's almost a thing that you need. It's not just that we're tentative, we're also chaotic at the same times. And these more different things are happening. But what we really need is assertive. We need somebody who knows what their job is, knows what the other's job is, and is very good at organising everything. Because the first goal, I think, was down to sort of just tentativeness. I mean, it's also a great finish. You just impulsive finish, and you can't take too much away from that. But there was just a bit sort of a tepid approach to defence. And then the second goal was more our kind of lack of ability to reorganise when Van Ayek was high up the pitch, which is going to happen all season long. So we need to develop some sort of strategy towards what happens if he gets up, because he's not a robot, he can't get back immediately. And what seemed to happen was all four of the defenders moved over, three of them ended up trying to occupy this one defender, one attacker, and then you're left with basically some back post, whereas an approach to dealing with that would have everybody understand what their role is. I mean, but ultimately, I think I said in the very first pod, I think we could do with somebody else in defence. I'm not sure that I think there's a step up which would help us, but
I've bored the tits of everyone with this already. So can someone say it so that I don't have to, or am I going to try and do a very, very brief version of this again? I think I did this either tail end of last season or possibly even last week. Is Trent Alexander-Arnold got made to look shit for the last 2 years because Fabinho died and then left, and that people were like, "This guy can't defend," and you were like, "No, it hasn't." He hasn't stopped being able to defend. He's always done this, but he had a really, really, really effective defensive midfielder that knew how to make sure that he didn't look like a fucking idiot. And then his legs broke and died. And then everyone was like, I don't know what's happened to this guy all of a sudden. And I thought Eccles played well. Eccles played well as one of three central midfielders playing in a very straight line. I still think that the answer, to some extent, I don't think it's the full answer, but I think it's part of the answer for Milan is, I don't know why I'm going first now, is I think you need, if you, in this three, I think you just need one guy that just goes, and I think probably the answer is Sheaf, but that I sort of not sure about that as being the real full answer for me. One guy that just goes, I can trust Bidwell to sort of not be as important going forward as Van Ayek is. And so I think probably what I'd do is my position is sort of ever so slightly right shifted whilst being defensively minded, so that one, I can cover if a counter-attack goes through the middle, then I'm there. But that if Van Ayek is like on the fucking byline, I'm already there waiting to be the auxiliary right back. So I agree with the idea that a better centre-back would benefit us, but I do think that the big gaping hole that we've got at the minute, and as much as I'd like to improve at left back, is just a nutter central defensive midfielder that's got the experience to know about kind of that covering.
So alongside Sheaf.
Because I think that my ideal would be that you've got Sheaf would cover for this psychopath central defensive midfielder when they're not fit. So Sheaf would come back and be the most defensive of that midfield three. If that person is fit, then your two more advanced are a mixture of either Torp, Sheaf, Radoni, whoever else, Eccles, Allen even, who I think has been intermittently impressive and not impressive. Maybe this is one to get onto. Like, you've got the tools to play whoever you need to play against. But I don't know whether Sheaf is the exact model of what I'm looking at there. I'm going to throw it at you, Dom, because you're the one that looks like you're most agreeing with me, and I only want people who are only ever going to agree with everything I say. No, go on, Neil, you go first then, go on.
No, just very quick. I don't know if that is where the genuine sort of chaos is happening, though. Obviously, I understand that with tactically, you can kind of prevent stuff before it gets to the place. But I think certainly with us, the issues are where the ball is within the defence. You know, it's when they're there having to make decisions or having to be the ones to make the tackle. And I don't know how much we draw into what happened last season, because a lot of it was just tired legs and people making really stupid decisions. But the stuff that happens seems to be happening around the defense rather that, so you can kind of preempt it. I get it. You preempt it with somebody who stops them getting into trouble anyway. And that obviously, I mean, that there's a whole load of logic to that, but we had a long season of obviously Sheaf playing that role last season, and not much has changed in that midfield area or defense. So like you say, unless we need somebody completely fresh or new to come into the team and change the dynamic of what they're doing, I feel like the defense is the area where you would elevate somebody.
But this is why I think it's not, that player isn't Sheaf, because even when you had Sheaf and Harmer, who nominally you'd expect Sheaf to be the more defensive of the two, it was really Harmer that was probably doing the kind of like bastard defensive work that I'm talking about most time. It's him that's like smashing someone for a counter-attack. It's him that's taking the yellow cards and stuff. Like, he's doing the dog dirty work that I'm talking about here. To your point about the kind of remediative, like pre-problem work.
Yeah, I get that.
In fact, not remediative, as in like remediative, like first stage remediative. Sheaf, I don't think, is necessarily always doing that, although he can. I think you want a big bastard doing it, but that Sheaf doesn't get the credit that he deserves for his use of the ball and his mobility. I think I just wonder whether you have got lovely options if you sign someone that is a bastard. But to your point, the answer is that you could probably do with a big bastard in central defence midfield, and you could do with a big bastard in centre back to plug both of those things. Two experienced 30 plus players that might not play more than 25 games this season, but that then when you look at the squad depth, which we believe is terrific at the minute, except we had to play our two reserve centre-backs in inverted commas on Friday, and we conceded 2 goals at home against the team that are nominally meant to be the worst in the division, and they were both poor goals. They might just be one-off goals, but they weren't like, this is not Wes Burns, Greenberg or Ipswich. This is like the Binks one. I genuinely thought that there'd been a time slowdown. I felt like I could have got out of my seat and headed that off the goal line if I'd have not been so pissed. That was at the other end of the stadium. Do you know what I mean? It happened in such... and the replay makes it 10 times worse. You watch the replay of it and you're just like, it's one of the slowest goals I've ever seen. So yeah, I think it's a little bit of both.
Just on Sheaf, by the way, I don't like using stats, but he does make more tackles than anybody else in the league almost consistently over the last 3 years. So that's the only stat I'll ever use, but I do think he does a lot of that work.
By the way, what an incredible stat. I goes down someone's totally subjective argument.
I think it's a good stat.
No, you are. What I'm saying is, what a polite way of saying, you fucking idiot.
I just don't like the idea of like people saying stuff like anybody listening to this and saying, no, that's not right. And if I could use stats, I never use stats, but if I can use stats to say, actually, maybe he does do that, then I'm gonna try. That's my thing.
I like Sheaf as light mopping up and then turning to... I think we've got a bit of delay, but I was just saying that I like Sheaf when he is mopping up, doing light touch tackles, and then turning to look to see where he can release the ball forwards. Whereas I want someone, and time after the ball is gone, making sure that whoever's attacking is slightly buried in the turf. I think we need someone there who is a little bit more rugged, because then that allows Sheaf to play his game, and we don't really have anyone else in the team that can play the way that Sheaf does. I want him to be free to do that, and who would sit a bit more defensively. I mean, for the first Oxford goal, when it went to Sims and he didn't clear it, we needed someone there who can take out that kind of threat. And I don't necessarily think that would have been Sheaf. I think that might have been something for a more defensive midfielder to do.
I agree with you. We're tired of experts. That's the overwhelming conclusion here. No, but look, I agree with you. I think that there is lots for Sheaf to do, but I think there's lots for everybody to do. And I agree with you on the tackle. Well, I agree with maths and
the number
about the tackles bit of it. That's absolutely fair. I just wonder whether it is. I'm trying to dig myself out of my own hole here. No, well, maybe it's Sheaf. But I agree with Imogen that I sort of would like to see him be more than that, and also provide that a little bit further up pitch. But that's that. While we're in midfield, Dom, can I talk to you about a player that you said, and I'm going to get my notes up here to quote directly from. Jack Rudoni is the worst player in the history of time.
I remember him saying that,
and will prove to be a joke signing that will embarrass the very face of the club. I wonder whether you'd softened on that opinion since having seen him, basically be exactly what you genuinely described, which was a player that can be good and might not also be everything that will solve all of our problems.
Yeah. So. On Jack Rodone, I think he's over the first few games he's been really eye-catching, just like some of the turns he's capable of, and just sort of the general busyness about him has been really impressive. Set pieces too have been quite good, and it's been quite good also that we've got Rodoni on one side and Torp on the other on corners, and they're both like really accurate corner takers, which I think is going to benefit us over the course of the season. The one thing still about Rudoni is that ability to pick penetrative passes. And I thought in the first half against Oxford in particular, he had about 3 or 4 chances just to send Wright and Sims clean through. And a couple of those, he just dithered over the opportunity to do so, and that chance passing by, and then 1 or 2 where he just didn't get the pass right at all, and that's really where he has to improve. I thought the start of the second half against Oxford, for about the first 10 minutes when we were on top, Rudoni got in some good positions and was starting to look like he was in the mood to play those passes, but the nature of the game changed against him. I thought when he came on against Bristol City in a League Cup in a deeper role, I quite like that ability to just charge forward from deep and create a bit of chaos, get into the box from good positions from there. I want to see that more. I think it's just in general that Bristol City Cup game, the substitutes there where we were chasing, we were trying to get into the game really, and we went 4-2-4. That was really fun to see, with Sims and Thomas Asante up front. Palmer was playing on the left wing for a bit, and he had Sakamoto, and then he had like quite an attacking midfield duo of Rodoni and Allen. I was surprised that Robbins didn't try something a bit like that when we were chasing against Oxford. We kind of stuck to that 4-2-3-1. But yeah, returning to Rodoni, I just don't think he's quite a number 10 in the way you'd want a number 10 to be, sort of floating between the lines and just making things happen with 1 or 2 touch passes. He's just very energetic and maybe not a particularly precise player. And I think that's going to be more valuable in a deeper role.
So the problem I've got is that I know because time has taught me this, that you're always right when we have a disagreement of this nature. I didn't think he was playing number 10 against Oxford. I thought he was. I just felt like he was playing. I felt like the problem for me was the lack of definition between the lines. I felt like it was about as like crystal linear 4-3-3 as you're gonna see. Do you feel like he was the most, sort of advanced enough to be and central enough to be the number 10 in that situation?
Yeah, so I think it's been an interesting thing because there's been like a bit of a debate really of are we playing 4-2-3 or 4-2-3-1? And
I think basically identical.
Yeah,
with very
similar sort of. Where I think if you look at what we're doing in possession, it looks a lot more like a 4-3-3, where there's a lot of license for all three of those midfielders to push forward into advanced areas. And I think Robbins just wants like one person sitting back and letting everyone else have that license to push forward. But I think off the ball, it looks a lot more like a 4-2-3-1, where Rudoni is pressing with the strikers, and then we've got a midfield two in front of the back four. So perhaps was sort of mixing and matching that in possession, out of possession shape. But to me, sort of formation is kind of what it looks like out of possession. And yeah, to me, it looks like Rudoni's essentially part of that front line, and we're playing two midfielders behind him.
It's going to be hilarious when I look at the heat map for this, and that Rudoni is like burning a hole through that central area.
The touch maps are like Rudoni is right next to Sims.
I'm like, yeah, but I thought that like Sims was also played as another midfielder, so you've not understood it. I'm gonna have to really scrape the barrel for trying to prove that I'm right. I'm like, actually, yeah, I know that their touch maps are the same, but Sims was way deeper than he should have been. And I actually agree that he should have been taken off. He should have been taken off much sooner, actually. Yeah, Rudoni I thought very interesting because, I was very hot on him in the preview, you less so, and that I think he has by turns been, even within the same game, really eye-catching and then really disappeared. Especially in this, and I think it's going to be interesting to see how the season goes on as to what bit of it is. I think there's a bit of kind of there's a bit of an assumption that we haven't changed a lot because we haven't signed a lot of what would consider to be very like first teamy players. But actually, I think behind the scenes things have changed quite a lot. I think the way that we're playing. Neil, was it you that retweeted something that said that we are above 60% possession for the season so far?
Yeah. It's obviously three games in, but it seems
there's a stark contrast compared to
yeah. Those first two games, absolutely, it's definitely one to keep an eye on because that would be a shift. Because last season we were absolutely a horses for courses team, where depending on the nature of the game, depending on the dynamics, depending on home and away, we could be going from anything from 30% possession all the way. We had a few 70%ers, so it'd be interesting to see just how superior in possession we kind of are more regularly this season. I get a sense we're going to try and beat that team.
In terms of other sort of major people-y changes, Imogen, I wonder whether you'd got any view on, and I think this is going to last us for the whole season, Dovin. I mean, I assume it's Dovin.
Oliver. He was much more commanding. Yeah, much more commanding. I thought at Stoke, he didn't really have a lot to do other than the goal, which sort of quite unfortunately went through his legs. But you could hear him on Friday night, and he made some great saves. I thought he looked commanding. I thought like he looked like he knew what he was doing. I felt comfortable with him there. There weren't any sharp intakes of breath. So that was nice. Although, to be fair to Ben Wilson, I didn't watch the Bristol game, but I saw the highlights, and he seemed to make some excellent saves. So that was nice.
Yeah, I thought he was I thought he was unlucky to get. In fact, not only did I think he was unlucky to get dropped for the Oxford game, I was also convinced that I'd read that he was starting and only really noticed that he wasn't there in the second half at one point.
Superb. Well, I'm just thrilled that my prediction of Collins being first choice has really played out.
Oh, okay.
On these first two games. He appears to be being sold now. So
I don't think we noticed at the time, don't we?
No, that's fine.
I've not even brought that up.
Listen, it's a long old season. All right, he'll be back.
He could easily be
any day.
It's entirely likely that he could start against Bristol on Saturday. By the way, as an aside, right, is there anything more boring in the entire world than playing Bristol City twice and then playing Oxford twice?
Dom and I were talking about this before we started recording. It's so dry. It's like when we played Middlesbrough 3 times the other season. Please, bear me.
Anything other than just someone that you've just played.
Yeah.
It's the absolute bottom of the barrel of anything that could happen in a cup draw. Oh, it's the the guy that you've just played. Yeah, you've got him again. This is why they should be rigged much more than they already are.
I know, yeah.
It has given me a little insight into Dom's life, because now I actually know who the players are on the opposition team. I'm like, well, this isn't fun. There's no surprises here. I know what they do. He's going to run. Yeah, he did that last time. Dom, is this your life now? I'm sorry. I'm sorry for you.
Okay, fabulous. Right, so final thing I think that we want to talk about is Milan van Ewijk.
Yes.
Wonderful legend, terrific right back, massive shagger. Does anyone who feels very confidently about the fact that they want to talk lovingly about him want to pick it up from him?
I will happily jump in, because that performance the other night was better than the Man United game kind of level of consistency and quality. I mean, he was just on it, like worryingly on it as well, because it was on TV and there's all this talk about potentially teams already looking at him, and he is he's very much an asset. So somebody, if they want to throw some money at him, he might think about it. So that is a little bit of a concern. There was something about all 3 of the big clubs in Holland looking at him, which I imagine he would entertain the notion of if they came with big money, and it would have to be big money because he's a brilliant player. But yeah, that was recency bias, but I would say his best game for us. I think all round, just attacking intent, because he can be a little bit sort of reserved and not willing to take people on as much as he should do with his speed. But like we've already mentioned a few times, that connection with Sakamoto just left him entirely sort of able and empowered to do exactly what he needed to do. I just thought it was a classic match from him, and much more of that to come, please. I just think you can't cope with him Sakamoto on the other hand side if they're playing like that. They're just too sort of explosive.
Imogen, what is he worth?
Oh gosh, you can't put a price on him, can you? I mean,
but if
he's too precious. He's too precious. And I thought I agree with you. I think he's been the man of the match every game. That
all right.
I think he's been fantastic. He was my player of the season last season, and I feel entirely vindicated. I'm bringing this up because of the Collins thing, so I just need to get some balance here. I thought he was so strong and pacey, but his deftness of touch is it's a joy to watch, and he took his goal remarkably well. It was one of those, when I watched it back, it felt a lot closer that each of them were getting to the ball than they actually did, and they all sort of just stopped and let it happen for him, but he was charging onto it and he took it really beautifully.
I'm a little bit disappointed because watching it in the stadium, it was sheer Carlos Alberto 1970. I thought, that is, my God. And then you watch it and it's like, oh, it's not quite, it's still brilliant, but
yeah.
But so I want to cut in here, right? Because we have to remember that they are 2 separate things. And so the television isn't the truth, and what we experienced isn't the truth. Something cosmically in between the 2 is the truth.
Yeah.
So I wanted to ask this before, but I didn't want to cut Dom off when he was talking about it, right? So I felt that in the stadium, I was really surprised when I watched it back that Wright hadn't taken more touches to generate the kind of impact that he did for that goal. I thought what he'd done was taken maybe 5 touches that took out and I'm going to quote you on this, 4 players, which I think is correct, by the way. But actually, when you watch the replay back, I think it's only 2 touches that he takes before then the ball comes in. And the whole thing happens so quickly. But I think when you see it live, is that whilst on a telly, it looks like a thing that's happened quickly, live, you can understand the thought process and the speed of mind about it that you can't in a way that happens on telly. And I think each of those things that looks on telly like they might have been incidental is, I think, right. There's something about what he does that I think is the best thing that he did all game and might be the best thing that he's done in a Cov shirt. He is that goal for me. I know that Van Eyck has to like strike it beautifully to get it in. It's not a chance unless Wright basically says, there's 4 defenders here that I'm going to fucking just bin. But then Sims does brilliantly to touch it on. But that Sakamoto does beautifully to understand that he can to leave it, and then But I think that goal is the sort of goal that watching it on telly doesn't justify it whatsoever. In the ground, is you look at the kind of presence of mind of footballers and the speed at which they have to compute things, and just think there's a reason that you earn what you earn. Like you are doing something that is beyond special. I thought that goal was absolutely unbelievable, but it did raise an interesting question to me that we can't resolve here about kind of what do those different conceptualizations mean?
That is a great question for us to ponder as a general point. It's one of those, isn't it? Like, because that it came across from me going about Carlos Alberto, and it is interesting because I think the experience that you're having within the stadium also adds to how you perceive the goal. So same goes for the first goal, where I would not shut up about how good that goal was to everybody around me when it went in. It's like, that is absolutely class, because it felt so explosive. It's just like, you are not stopping that goal. And then obviously you zoom out to the telly and you watch it through that lens and you get a different sensibility. You get a different feel for it because you don't get that sort of rawness, and the explosiveness just doesn't come across. And it
takes the energy out.
It does. It absolutely does. So you can analyze it in a slightly different way, but it's like you say, I think the rawness of being that close to the pitch and actually recognizing kind of the intensity of what's going on with all the players is something that's different. And actually, it probably needs to be acknowledged a little bit more when people are kind of analyzing games. Like they don't seem to as much. Like watching on telly is just not the same as seeing what's going on in the moment by the pitch. They're just 2 very different things.
Mm. You could see it when you could see it when Wright scores his 3rd goal, when he receives the ball and he's about to score the 3rd, and the camera angle that's behind him, and you watch the crowd go up in gradients. Yeah. There's a step up and then a step up, and then everyone goes wild, which you don't get on TV. Maybe it's because you already know he's going to score, I guess, because you're watching the replay. But when you see it on TV, you think, well, all he's got to do is just take it across, slow it down, and then take it around the keeper. When you're watching it live, all I thought was, oh, don't fuck this up. Please don't fuck this up. And the euphoria that hits once it hits the back of the net is obviously incredible, especially at the timing and the way that we've sort of been pinned back with the 2nd goal. I don't think you get that on TV, and you do have to, you're right, you do have to adjust your analysis and your reading of the game depending on whether you're watching it live or on TV.
By the way, on that, which I think is something very interesting as well, is I didn't think that as soon as he collected the ball, I was like, oh, fantastic, I think we've won 3-2.
I think that's the same.
I think that Wright has got a bit of a knack for, he's like a sort of, when Gyökeres took his first penalty for us, I was like, I've never been less confident about a guy scoring a penalty for, because this doesn't seem like the sort of thing he could do. Yeah. But that Wright is a score the winner guy in my head. I think if he's got something to do that's boring, it's not going to work. But that if I wanted him to score the winner in a game, or have the decisive, like when he took the penalty against Man United, I was like, I know he's going to score it because I just trust this guy to deal with the pressure of that situation.
Don't they call it clutch? Is that a thing now?
I believe if you're young, is that they call it coming clutch? Like for American sports. I think that Wright, perfectly being American, is a clutch player. I don't know what that fully means, but let's between us.
I believe you. Yeah.
Let's Thelma and Louise this description here. We'll drive off into the sunset, like if we're wrong, but then we'll do it together. Where in a way that if that had been in the 50th minute, I'm not sure he scores it. The second that it means as what it meant is he's like the confidence to just stride past the keeper. He was just like, I had this. That's a very interesting bit of his play to me because I alluded to it earlier. The big frustration for me is for a player that seemed so dominant in that game. We won. I'd love to go back and have a look to see how many corners we got, but how many of them corners came from Wright is that there seemed to be this odd, almost acceptance that because part of it was the crowd were going mad every time we got a corner.
Yeah.
Every time we got a corner, I sort of thought that was a chance not taken. But that come the final minute with the 1-on-1, he's just like, oh, come on, I've played with you long enough.
Didn't he have a record number of touches in the opposition box or something? Or was I tweeted something the other day? Like
not just for last season, not just for
since 2013 in the Championship.
Yes. Since they've recorded numbers, I think it was 21 touches in the opposition box in the 90, and that's the highest that anyone has ever had.
Neil, I thought you didn't like stats.
I don't like them. I don't like using them, and yet here I am. So, like,
but that's a fairly you'd be hard pushed to not read something into that particular stat. Surely,
it's a great stat.
It makes total sense as well, doesn't it? Just you could tell from minute one. He fancied himself that game. Like his first touch was to pick up the ball, knock it 20 yards and just leg it. He's like, I know how quick I am. I know I'm in the zone. And that stat didn't actually surprise me at all. He was in a threat all the way through the match.
And there was another stat that I thought was absolutely really sort of astounding, which was Josh Eccles had the overall median number of touches in a game of any championship game, measured across every single championship game. He had the exact average number of touches on the pitch, and I thought that was why he was just as good as Haji Wright. That was why he deserved as good.
Yeah, I'd have him as an 8. I think maybe that sounds about right. I just
thought the idea that this guy is just getting the ball and passing it to a really average level, just for me, just said. This guy also has played exactly as well as someone that scored 2 goals. And as far as I'm concerned, gets the assist for Van Eyck's goal, even though it wasn't the direct assist. He has played as well as that. And I think that's why everyone in the stadium realised that those 2 players have had the exact same quality game.
Yeah, you can't argue with the numbers.
The problem is that I know that he's not even going to listen to this.
He blocked us or muted us, so we.
I just don't think Paul listens if he's not on it. If he's on
Laurie doesn't listen if he's not on.
No, I mean, no. And this is the sort of narcissist kind of vampires that we've deliberately tried to rid ourselves of. Although
he's got like a fan club of people across the various platforms asking, "Where's Paul? We miss Paul." Both on YouTube or Instagram or Twitter or all the other platforms, but he's heavily missed.
A lot of them a lot of them profiles are nom de plumes of mine.
I see.
No, yeah, of course he's missed. You know, he's a content generator. He's a big, angry, bear-looking man. He's like a sort of a hyper me. You know, he's much more shouty and aggressive and less interested by facts than I am. And you know, I'm already too far over that way.
Yeah, I believe you. Contrary. That's how I would.
Oh yeah, and as well, no one has ever been more convinced of their own correctness in spite of fact than Paul is. So look, Van Eyck is fantastic. The defence is, a work in progress. That's me being kind. The midfield looks interesting. Sims could or could not deserve to get played into playing more. That feels like it's it, right?
Yeah, good chat.
We've got this is the thing. Like, it's going to be.
Oh no, we've got to do it again.
Groundhog Day.
We could literally put out this podcast
Yeah.
in 2 weeks' time and create the illusion of
just dub it. Yeah.
So we played Bristol City,
Yeah.
the
Mr. Black,
Atlanta Falcons. We get to stick it out, and then all of the advertising money that we earn from this podcast, which is enough to keep the four of us in full-time work. We don't even need to do the 8-hour normal recording session that we have to condense down into an hour and a half.
There's the loopholes.
Okay, let's just make sure that we cut this out so that people don't know about it. Any final thoughts before we wrap up?
Not from me.
It seems like a big no. Dom, thank you.
Cheers, good to be on.
Neil, thank you.
Dankeschön.
Imogen, thank you.
Thanks, Joseph.
And hey, how about for once, I say thank you to me. Like, let's get some gratitude for Big Bad JC just occasionally, right? It's been great talking to you, listener, and it's also been great for you to listen to us. Bye.